Obviously the Iron Bowl is a great rivalry game, one that's recognized all over the country in college football. If you're a competitor, it's a great opportunity to compete, to play in a game like this that means a lot to a lot of people, on both sides. But our team has worked very hard to create an opportunity for themselves, this year, and I think the focus needs to be on, playing your best football, which goes back to preparing the best, playing with the best fundamentals, having the best discipline, try to do your job the best you can against a very, very, very good team. Auburn has, a lot of returning, starters on their team. They've got a lot of experienced players. They've played extremely well all year long, especially their offense is, one of the leading offensive teams in the country. Gus has always done a fantastic job with the offense, but their ability to run the ball effectively, throw it when they need to, score the points that they've been able to score on a pretty consistent basis against just about everybody in this league. They got a good offensive line. They got good inside runners. Nick Marshall does a very good job of implementing their offense, and he's very athletic and makes a lot of plays as a rusher as well. Tre Mason is the leading rusher in the league. Nick Marshall has almost 1,000 yards rushing himself. So, they create a lot of issues and a lot of problems. They have good receivers that can make plays down the field when you try to load up on them. Defensively, they played really, really well. They're hard to score on, and I think that's the most important thing about playing good defense. They create a lot of negative plays for you offensively, and they've got a really good pass rushing team, and they've been able to, create some negative plays in the passing game because of their pass rush. So very, very good in the kicking game. Most of the time the guy kicks the ball out of the end zone. They have very few punt return yards against them all year long. They do a good job on their coverage team, so they got good specialists. So all the way around, this is a very, very good team, and I think their record, sort of reflects that.
Your cornerbacks, could you talk about their development over this season, and are there particular challenges that Auburn presents on a corner, the way you guys play defense?
Well, I think that, the one thing you have to do when you play Auburn, everybody on the perimeter has to tackle well, has to play blockers well. Their receivers do a really good job of blocking. You got to play cut blocks. You got to be able to play physical on the edges. You got to keep good contain and good support position all the time, and it takes a lot of discipline to do that. Our corners are going to have to do that. Everybody that plays in the secondary is going to have to do something when it comes to run support. I think that, our corners have improved throughout the course of the year. Cyrus has done a little better the more and more experience that he gains. Dion Ballou has been our most consistent guy. He's struggled a little bit with injuries at times and not been able to play all the time, but we're hopeful that he'll be able to play this week, and that has created an opportunity for a lot of other guys to play, and I think all those other guys has improved as well.
One more, if I could. I apologize about the clutter question. Is the thrill of an Iron Bowl victory more intense than the agony of an Iron Bowl defeat?
I can't answer that question because I never think of things, in those terms. You're focused on, what you need to do today to try to give your team the best opportunity to be successful. You don't think about results. You think about the process of what you need to do to help your players do a good job in the game. To me, that's your job as a coach. It's not really worrying about whether you're going to celebrate or be sad. I never think of it that way. I always think about what do we need to do to try to play well in every situation in the game, and the same thing during the game. Focus on the next play, focus on what you got to do the next play to try to give your guys the best chance to be successful, make corrections, coach them on the mistakes that they made. So, this is an ongoing process for the whole week, plus the whole 60 minutes of the game, right down to the last play of the game. And then when the game's over, it is what it is. But, you know you've given everything that you have to your players and your team as a coach, and I hope our entire staff looks at it the same way, so that you help the players have a chance to be successful.
Nick, you talk a lot about consistency in performance. How close has CJ come to delivering that week in and week out this year, and how important is he in stopping the zone read that Auburn runs?
Well, you know, CJ's played fantastic football every game this year, and I can't recall that he's ever had a bad game. I think he's been the point leader on defense and production points, you know, just about every game. But his leadership, you know, his ability to affect the other players in terms of getting us lined up right, getting us in the right defense, making the right adjustments, I think is just as critical as his phenomenal play in terms of his playmaking ability and doing a great job in terms of doing his job. And I think that both of those things are going to be critical factors, you know, in this game. You know, they do a lot of formations. There's a lot of adjustments that you have to do on defense, especially to be able to stay sound on the perimeter and to make sure that everybody's in the right gaps when they run the inside runs. And they're effective at doing both. And he's the guy that's going to try to adjust that defense all the time to try to get us in the right spot. So it's not only going to be his ability to make plays, but also his ability to help us execute the game plan and get guys in the right spots. And you got to do it at a fast pace. And I think the experience that he has will hopefully help us do that. So I think both things are really important.
From the beginning of the season until now, what improvements have you seen from Nick Marshall, and what challenges does he present?
Well, you know, I think the guy has really played well all year long. I think he's playing his best football of the season of late in terms of, you know, his confidence in executing the offense, the knowledge and experience that he has in executing the offense. Probably the number one challenge that he presents is just his physical ability of being a phenomenal athlete who is a great runner with the ball, but also a guy who has got good touch and can make plays in the passing game. So you certainly can't say, okay, we're just going to stop this guy running. And, you know, he's made a lot of big plays, and he's especially good deep ball thrower. So, you know, that in and of itself, you know, creates a lot of issues and a lot of problems if you're a defensive player. So I think the guy is one of the most talented guys, you know, in our league at his position, even though his style may be a little bit different relative to what he does for them and their offense. He's effective as anybody as we play.
Both teams have been good in red zone defense. I wondered, is that just a product of playing good defense all the time? Is there something to being very good in that area defensively?
Well, you know, I think it's something that you try to emphasize and work on with your players. You know, if you don't give up big plays and you play well in the red zone, you know, all of a sudden you can get difficult to score on, which they have done a really good job of. And that's what we try to do as well. So I do think there is, to play well in the red zone, you do have to emphasize it with your players. They have to have an understanding that, you know, the field shrinks. You got to play things a little bit differently. And I think they do a good job of that. And, you know, our players have done a fairly good job of that this year as well.
You've talked before about the Bluegrass miracle effect, and obviously Auburn had a similar play in their last game. What do you remember about that game against Kentucky and about how your players responded in the next week and moving forward?
Well, I think there's a big difference in those two games. You know, first of all, you know, I thought when we played at Kentucky, we didn't play a very good game. You know, I think Auburn played a very good game against Georgia. All right, and and they made a play at the end of the game that won the game for them. So I just felt like we didn't play a very good game at Kentucky, and we got kind of lucky to win, which to me was not a good thing. But in their case, they played a very good game, and I don't think they were lucky to win. I'm not saying that at all. And they really probably deserved to win the game based on how they played in the game, and they got rewarded for it in the end by making a big play.
Coach, a couple of Thanksgiving questions. First of all, tell us what you're thankful for, and tell us what the plans are for the players in relation to Thanksgiving holiday.
Right. Well, I give thanks every day for a lot of things. First of all, to have the opportunity to do what I do, which I love to do, but also health, also, relationships, which as you get older, they become more and more important, to you in terms of friends and family and, people that you have a lot of gratitude for the relationships that they have. We've obviously been, very blessed and very fortunate to be able to have a lot of things, but we also try to share a lot of those things with other people so that, they may have a little more comfort in their life because having compassion for other people is, I think very, very important. So all those things I'm very thankful for. What we do with our players is we move practice up a little on Thursday, so the guys that live, a couple-hour radius from here could go home for Thanksgiving, and then we have the other players that don't have the opportunity to go home all come to the coach's house, and we usually have 12 or 15 at our house that have Thanksgiving dinner with us, and some of the other coaches do the same thing with some of their position players. And then we have Thanksgiving dinner on Friday when everybody comes back before we get ready to leave.
Coach, it seems like some of those media types have built. This is the third game we've built is kind of the game of the year. Your team is. How much does experience you guys in having these hype games come into play that kind of helps people focus on the things they need to focus on?
Well, I can't really answer that. I mean, probably a little bit different for every guy based on their experience, knowledge. Guys that have played in this game, forget anything else about this. This is Alabama-Auburn game, so it's the Iron Bowl. So that in and of itself, makes this a very emotional game. But, we just try to emphasize with our players that you got to focus on the right stuff so that you can go play your best football. And if there was a better way to do it, we would already try to do it because we've already had some other big games. All right, so we need to go out there, and it starts with your preparation and your mindset in terms of how you go about preparing so that you can recognize and do the things that you need to do to be effective at playing your position. And at the end of the day, it will probably come down to the team that executes the best, in the game will have the best opportunity to be successful.
And could you talk a little bit about AJ's consistency from week to week, but also just within the games where he just kind of stays even keel and everything?
Well, I think it's really important, at his position that he sort of stays in the moment and stays even keel, that you can't, get too emotional when you're playing quarterback or sort of get out of, that the rhythm that you have and start thinking you got to force things or make plays or do something out of the ordinary. I mean, I think that's when you make emotional decisions, which probably aren't always good decisions and sometimes can backfire on you. And just got to keep focusing on taking what the other team gives. AJ's done a good job of that all year long and has played with a lot of consistency in the game. And their defense presents some challenges in terms of their pass rush as well as their experience and their scheme that, it's going to take all 11 guys on our side to, have success against what they do.
Just looking at your defensive line this season, what have they done, those guys up front, what have they done to help you be one of the best run defense teams and set up guys like CJ to make those tackles?
Well, I think our up front guys have done a good job of, striking blockers and playing gaps and trying to stay on the line of scrimmage and not allowing a lot of movement up front. I think that's probably the key to the drill. We certainly have tried to improve, ourselves as a pass rushing team so that, we can affect the quarterback a little bit more when we do create those kinds of situations. But, I think when you stop the run, you stop the run with 11 guys. I think when you stop the pass, you stop the pass with 11 guys. It's a combination of, run support, good tackling, people playing the right gaps up front. And our front guys have done a good job of that. And when you play pass defense, it's a combination of affecting the quarterback with pressure in the pocket so he can't step up, and good coverage, technique in the back end. And, at times we haven't done that as well as we'd like. We've given up less big plays lately, but that's something that we have to focus on, is not giving up big plays, because whether they're, some kind of trick play, it usually comes down to discipline, eye control for the guys that are involved, and we need to do a better job of that, and hopefully, as we've gained more experience, we'll be able to do a better job.
Coach, how does Auburn use the fullback in their offense, and how does that sort of differentiate them from some of the other spread offenses you face?
Well, their fullback is a fullback, and he does a really, really good job of blocking. And even though, there's still a lot of 3 wide-out type sets, regardless of the personnel group that they have in the game, their fullback is in the backfield, and he has got a blocking assignment on about every play. And I think does a really, really good job of executing for them. If you didn't have a guy that was a good blocker at fullback, you wouldn't be able to have the success running, even though they have very talented runners, that they do. And you talk about a tough, physical guy that, he doesn't get the ball much, but he sure does a good job of finishing, playing with toughness, blocking the right guy and blocking him the right way. And that's can't say enough about what that guy does for them.
Coach, with Tre, over here, Coach. Okay. Coach, with Tre Mason, obviously one of the best backs in the SEC, what makes him a special player? And 2, how much does the read option help him, because you don't know whether Nick has it or Tre has it?
Well, I not to take anything away from either player, but Tre Mason to me is a really good physical, can make you miss, hard to tackle, very, very good inside runner, but also has the ability to bounce outside and make plays on the perimeter, which he's done on many occasions this year. But he really churns and tries to get extra yards after contact, which I think is always a great sign. I think that anytime you have a quarterback who is a threat, all right, that's sort of seeding the ball and can pull the ball or whatever, it makes the defense a little bit more cautious, all right, about being responsible for that guy. And I don't think in any way that minimizes the quality of player that Tre Mason is, because he's a fantastic player. But at the same time, it does make them a more difficult offense to defend. Thank you.